Chiaroscuro is the art of shadows and lights. In interpretation, this means voicing and placing in the background some things in the texture which you don't want to overwhelm the attention of the listener. That also is a way to voice specific patterns like chords that you sculpt rather than pluck and display. The instrument is versatile as a piano goes. No two pianos will come alike when you play the same piece. Standardized maker like Steinway is less surprising because it's available mostly everywhere and has almost no competition on the concert stage in terms of choice of different approach of the sound. For industrial quantities reasons more than for aesthetic. But even if your musical intentions as a concert pianist can be tainted by the choice of the instrument that most of the time you don't have the choice of, you try to bring through each handmade concert piano, no matter how standardized they have individualities. Of course, the tuner's voice, the grooves on the felt of the hammers so that they can hug more the steel string to give it a warmer tone than if it's shaved. And if it's shaved, then it rebounces from the string, and so the sound is more projecting rather than more sort of coating the string. People speak about meaty fingers for violinists when they play and they have to suppress the string with on the board with their hand. If they have a meaty tip of the finger, they cover more the string than if they have a bony tip of finger. That's even on the same instrument can make the sound different because of the strictly morphology of the violinist. Of course, vocal cords and voices are signatures on their own. Pianos, being more industrial and less individual in the relation to the performer, like a horse and a horseman, they are more susceptible to surprise you rather than to teach you how to play on them. I've played some pianos from the past century which have such an aesthetic that is built in their conception that they tell you how to play the piece you play on them. They make you understand what not to do. You don't play the same fortissimo on a Bösendorfer than on a Bechstein, on a Steinway, on a Blüthner, or on a Grotrian Steinweg, among the German pianos of today, or among the old pianos of the past like Pleyel, Erard, Gaveau. Of course, the aesthetics of the instrument have to do with the repertoire for which composers who played them wrote. After all, Liszt, Chopin, Brahms, Mendelssohn, Schumann composed on the romantic fortepianos, Scriabin, Rachmaninoff, Mettner on the early 20th century modern pianos, Debussy, Fauré, Ravel composed on the French builders of the turn of the 20th century. So inevitably, beyond their inner worlds of creativity, it was filtered through the sounds of the pianos that they obtained to play through, for the balance between the basses and the top, for the evenness of the action, for the length of resonance. It is a peculiar fact that before you sit on a piano to play what you have prepared, and therefore hear it in your head all ready to be displayed, and the way it comes out, either through the filter of your lack of technique, touch control, or the inevitable unexpected, which anyway happens, either because the instrument has a way of displaying the sounds, the timbre of the chiaroscuro in question, of the light and dark, has to do a lot with the concept of the instrument. You have instruments that are made to project more, and others which are more muffled sounds, more rounded. And the acoustics combined to the instruments create something of an alchemy that comes up only at the performance, because the audience also adds to the mix by their presence, their held breath, their physical presence. They absorb resonance of the whole, which is bouncing on the walls of the hall, and the whole sounds different from the rehearsal room in terms of the energy of the impact of the sound that was resonant with less effort, and then you have to put more effort to obtain the same resonance. Besides, the pianist sits on the back of the instrument, and the instrument projects on the side through the opening of the lid, which means that the audience hears what the pianist doesn't, because the pianist is on the back of the instrument, on the tail, if you want. And so if the acoustic, the feedback brought you a certain elaborate awareness of the synergy of the amount of energy to display in order to perform the piece, and therefore push down all the keys, as simply as that. When you start playing and you hear that your sound is not going that far as at the rehearsal, because it's absorbed by the presences of the people, then the danger is to overcompensate by pushing more, but then you get more tension in the tendons, and then your precision is less good, as well as your shiftings are less precise because you're more stiff. Stiffness is the, except for the palm of the hand to produce the articulation, is the big enemy of the pianist. You have to be shoulders, arms, elbows relaxed, tendons relaxed, even if some chords that demand some specific pattern of performing them, because they're either too large or just plain awkward in their display of white and black keys, inevitably demands some tension. And you have to make sure that it doesn't stay so during the performance, because if you do, you cannot last through the piece. And if you have octave sections where you have to precisely organize the imprint so that you don't play sevenths or nines, which would be dissonant, and then take in account the higher placed black keys to the lower placed white keys when you go from one down or from down up. You have to anticipate every shifting, every gesture in the practicing, so that when you display in the performance, it just touches the right note with the right amount of weight and speed of depression. And if the action is heavier, if the acoustic is drier, you feel like you have to force more, it doesn't work. First of all, it's to the detriment of the quality of the tone, and then it's to the detriment of the precision of the notes, and finally, it's to the detriment of the whole structure you have organized in your mind that holds, because of all these elements to take in account for it to hold. As ephemeral as it is during a performance, as much as you deal with the unexpected of the moment, the nervousness, I don't know, a sweat falling drop on the keys and then you start slipping. The old pianos until the early 80s of the 20th century had ivory keys, and they were less slippery because they had shapes so that it wasn't totally flat on the white keys. Whenever all the pianos since are made with plastic, and they're very flat and very slippery, let less if you have a drop of sweat fall on it. You cannot plan all the unexpected, but you practice to make sure that going through you will be having some basis. And then comes the chiaroscuro, the light, the coloring, the voicing, the shaping of the sound, the sculpting of the expression from a chord to a melody, to a line, to a secondary voice, to a polyphony, to a pedal, a half pedal, a vibrato pedal that keeps some shimmering resonance without to be blurry and avoiding the dryness. In other words, you play on your intentions as a pianist, hoping that the result will match your intentions. And when you hear yourself on the recording, usually you hear performers say, "It's not what I wanted, it didn't come out the way I expected. I thought I did this and I thought I'll obtain more of this, and then in fact I realize objectively when you hear it without to play that it's not what came out in the mix of things." So in the action you just play. In the reflection you can draw some conclusions about the next time you play through so that you manage better this or that aspect of it. But since the variables never change, seem to stop varying because the pianos change, the acoustics where you play change, every time everything has to be rethought from the ground up. But you still want to produce the quality tone, the voiced tone, the imaginary analogy to taste or to light or to even cold and warm or dark and light. At whichever level of analogy you find yourself trying to play an imaginary inner world that materializes during the performance, and how it's accepted by the listener and how it's projected by the emitter who produces the sound, and how you have prepared it prior to the performance, from the score to the keyboard and from the keyboard to the audience. There are so many filters that vary the intentions into the realizations. And sometimes miracle things happen better than you thought for some sections, worse for others, possibly. The mix of the events also can turn in your advantage. Possibly a lot of these innuendos are missed by the uninformed audience, which is not bad. And possibly the performer is over aware of details to really become the conductor who doesn't play but basically conducts the storytelling. And being both at the same time the performer on the nano detail and the conceptor of the interpretation at the same time while playing, the conductor and the orchestra, the awareness of what you really produce is tainted by the emotion of the moment, of the piece itself, of the atmosphere in the hall, of the sharing of the moment that is so special, because it's not like in a recording session or practicing where you can restart every little bolt until it fits together. No, there you just walk through the bridge and it better hold. And how you walk on it, and how you cross the beginning to end of the piece, arching the phrase so that the storytelling is convincing, emotional, driven, whatever you want it to be, you planned to be, and how much of this plan is resulting in the reality. And perhaps with age and experience, you have less surprises or less sensitive to the variables, which are inevitable of the moment, because it's on the spur of the moment. No matter how you planned it, how you played it yesterday, how you will play it tomorrow, on the spot you share with people today, there, now, at this moment, and that's the only moment. For all these pieces to come together and produce this performance. It's frightening, it's motivational, and is mesmerizing. Thank you.